Here we go. It is, am I recording now, I guess? Have to do this, my video part of our assignment, and I'm having to talk to you about something. One of the first things we talked about was the speed of things that are moving around us, and the how fast that the Earth is going, how fast our galaxy is going. One of the neatest things to me about our galaxy and our comet and where we live at is or not our comet, but our universe where we live at, in the Milky Way and all this other things is comets. Back in the day, I can remember seeing Halley's comet back. I think it was back in '86 or something like that. I remember seeing Halley's comet for just a brief moment and everything else. But I used to live out in Piercy, had 20 acres out there that I was really, really proud of, and Hale-Bopp came through. I think it was back in like 96, 97, somewhere in that area. And there was not very many lights out there in Piercy, and I could watch, the stars nearly every night if I wanted to. I went out there and a lot of times just laid on my driveway and watched the stars going around us. And one evening, as we was laying out there to the northwest, I saw this dot in the sky. I said, look, and I didn't have any idea what it was. And sure enough, it ended up being that Hale-Bopp comet that they had discovered. And Halley's comes around every 75, 76 years, something like that. It is when it makes its rotation. As fast as it's going, it takes it that long to, make a complete revolution around whatever it's running around. The Hale-Bopp comet, on the other hand, it won't be back in 30 lifetimes, because it won't come back around for about 4,200 years. So us getting to see it, when we were out there watching everything else, we watched it for a few nights as it was, making its pass along. And it was kind of neat that, I won't ever see it again. So it was a once in a lifetime period. The video that Mr. Harmain made, if you look here at this one, velocity of celestial bodies, it talks about how fast these different things are going and the speeds that they are. This one actually talks about it even more. This graph here talks about that the whole group that we're in travels along at over 7 million miles an hour. And that's phenomenal. You think that we're standing here as I'm talking to y'all, that I'm going 7 million miles an hour. I've raced most of my life, and I like to go fast, and so it's kind of neat to me that we're going that fast and we don't even know it. I do radar at work. One of the things that's neat about radar is we have to estimate the speed of the vehicle that we're looking at. Whatever it is that we're watching coming towards us or anything else, we have an estimation in our mind, through our experience, through watching the vehicle, listening to the vehicle, listening to the sound it makes and everything else, and we'll in our mind say, hey, that vehicle's going along 35, 40 miles an hour, maybe in a 25 mile an hour zone. Well, when we think that vehicle's going along 35, 40 miles an hour in that 25 mile per hour zone, or say it's going 50 miles per hour in a 35 mile an hour zone or 30 mile an hour zone, we estimate that thinking, that thing looks like it's going pretty fast. I think it's going around, 42, 43 miles an hour. I use the radar to confirm what I think. When I send the radar out there, the radar hits the vehicle, bounce back to me, and it gives me a reading of what it is. And if it agrees with what I'm thinking, then I will usually make a stop on that person and then, go have a visit with them. And it depends on their attitude, whether they get a coupon or not. I call tickets coupons all the time. So it's pretty interesting that, this, the speed of these bodies that we're talking about. Mr. Benji was telling me about, making all these things look big in here and everything for y'all. And it's pretty cool that what we're living with, the data that we put into these graphs, the total for everything is over 7 million miles an hour for all of us. And for the solar system that we're in, it's 1,302,000. Heck, the Earth by itself, turns at over 1,000 RPM, or over 1,000 miles per hour as it's making its rotation. But anyway, enough said on that. We'll move on now to unemployment ratings percentages from the Clinton years and the Bush years. One of the things that she was talking to us about on these things was how that these graphs are skewed, and if you have a graph that is skewed and it doesn't start at zero, then you can make any kind of bit of data you want to look any kind of way you want to. If you look at this first graph, it shows that it looks like during the Bush years that the unemployment rate was a lot lower than it was during the Clinton years. It looks like they really had a lot more unemployment during the Clinton years than they did during the Bush years. But if you'll notice, the graph starts at 5.175. If you look at the other graph, the one that starts at 0, you'll see that there's not hardly any difference at all in the two years, the two presidents thing, because the whole values here in the one graph is 5.175 to 5.210. So it doesn't have a real big spread, and so it makes it look like those the President Bush had a lot better unemployment rates than he did. They have all kinds of reason to put forth skewed graphs or skewed information. All these politicians always want to look better than the other one. These are a couple of graphs about bowlers. If you'll notice on the bowling averages, that one of them starts at 105 and goes to 130, and you've got Diana that bowls a 120, Hildy bowls a 114, and Emily bowls a 127. So in actuality, there's not that much difference in those three bowlers. If you start at 0, you can see how the graphs correspond to that. There's another graph here. Let's see, where is the Cartera? Yeah, here's a Cartera. I got a pie graph on it. And the neat thing about it is developing the formulas and everything else to make the areas and things like that. That's a whole nother different topic to talk about. But if you look at the percent of sales here that Cartera had in this particular pie graph, it's 4%. If you look at the graph that they drew, that we put over here in our thing, it looks like the size of their Cartera is actually a whole lot bigger. It looks like it's, the chart of Cartera, the circle of the thing in the other graph would actually have Cartera at about 20.7%, where in actuality they only had 4%. So there again, there's all types of reasons that folks want to have skewed information. It's kind of just like in the Bible. You can take anything out of the Bible, and you can prove just about anything if you take things out of context and don't read the whole deal. Anyway, that's pretty interesting information on these. About how that the information can be it's not necessarily skewed. It's entered correctly, but when we look at it, it all makes think, oh man, they're selling a heck of a lot of stuff. They're doing they have a great part of that percentage of the sales in that particular chart. This is something that's kind of near and dear to me. This Venn chart of Americans who are obese, diabetic, and have high blood pressure. I guess there's over 326 million Americans. Says 93 million are classified as obese. 10.5% of Americans have type 2 diabetes. 32.7% of Americans have high blood pressure. And it shows that 90% of American type 2 diabetics are classified as obese. 90% of American type 2 diabetics have high blood pressure. 86% of obese people have high blood pressure, and 81% of American type 2 diabetics are obese, and they do have high blood pressure. By putting all this information here and putting all this Venn information and that little bitty U looking thing there with all the percentages and everything else, we were able to come up with one, that chart. That was something by itself. And then two, we come up with this huge Venn chart that tells about how the probability of Americans that probably have all three, probability of Americans with these type of problems, 63.2%. This chart breaks it all down to where who has high blood pressure, who has diabetes, and who is obese, who has all three, who has two, and everything. And it's pretty interesting information. Myself, You know, I have high blood pressure. I have diabetes, and according to the charts, it says I'm obese. I'm a little heavy to me, but according to the charts, it says I'm obese. So this applies even to myself. I mean, you know, whether I like it or not, it's the truth. I'm always worrying about my weight. I didn't ever used to have to. I broke my leg back in '99, and from '99 forward, I've not been able to be. Well, I'm good now, but probably for 5-6 years after that, when I broke my leg, I had to have operations and everything else, and so I gained a little bit of weight. And since I gained a little more weight and slowed down big time, whenever you slow down and whenever you not as active as you ought to be and everything else, that's when you have more of a probability to have high blood pressure, to have diabetes, and you have to be obese. I've always been stout all my life, so like I said, I never have really worried about it too much. But I guess according to this data to the data that I am a little bit. So one of the things that's neat, it says that you're likely to be obese if you live in Arkansas, since 35% of the people in Arkansas are obese. It's much more likely if you live in West Virginia that you'd be obese, since 38.1% of the people there are obese. Colorado has the best percentage of people who are not, where it only has 22.6% of the folks in Colorado are not obese, according to all this data that we were able to develop. All right, we're going to go here to another graph that we came up with about heights of Army recruits in inches and heights of mall shoppers in inches. Excuse my phone, I didn't realize I'd not turned it off. Oh my goodness, there it is. Anyway, sorry, it's off now, so vibrating on the table. Anyway, one thing that it showed about the heights of Army recruits in inches, we had to put a trend line in these. The trend line for the heights of Army recruits in inches is pretty well level. I mean, because there's not that much difference. You know, the Army recruits, according to what I've got here, were anywhere from 66 inches tall to 80 inches tall. And with them being 66 inches, you know, 65 foot is 60 inches. So 5'6", 5'8". We had a number of 6-footers. We had one that was just a little shy of 6 foot, and then one that was actually 6 foot, 8 inches tall. So, you know, they're pretty good tall guys and everything else. And most of your Army recruits, more than likely, are going to be men. There are going to be a few women, you know, but in Army recruits, and they're probably going to be the shorter of the bunch. But most of them are going to be men, and most of them, it looks like, are pretty much the same height, except for that one really, really tall guy. On the other hand, when you look at mall shoppers, if you can look at, I think you can see all this right here where the dots are and everything, where it shows where they are and everything else, and the percentages and the mean and all these other type things we started. This was something I just started learning about. I hadn't even heard of this, and oh my God, I don't know if I'd ever heard of it, you know, but I heard, I guess, whenever I was a kid in school, and I graduated in school in 1977. So things were a whole lot different back then than they are now. Now, then, if you look at this one for the heights of random mall shoppers in inches, you'll see everywhere from 34 inches to the highest one is what, 77 inches. So that's 7 or 6'5", I guess, is the tallest one at the mall. So at the mall, you got anybody from, you know, you got little kids that are out there that are, you know, first and second graders. And then you have them all the way up to, you know, basketball players at the mall. You know, the whiskers are the distances from the box. And if you look at the other two, we'll talk about that in a second. The median of the Army recruits was 72 inches, whereas the median for mall shoppers was 60 inches. And there was such a spread in between the two. You know, I mean, there's 30 something inches in between the difference. She had us do a box and whisker chart. The Army recruits is only, you know, you see it's a real thin graph, and it's pretty straight, really. It's not, you know, you got the highest whisker is at 80 inches. The lowest whisker there is at 66. And everything in between. The median is 72 inches again. And the mall shoppers, you see it's a lot wider box. The whiskers on it are a lot further apart. The shortest one was 34 inches, and it's pretty good ways down. The tallest one was 77. And then most everybody was in the middle there somewhere. It looks like there was more people below maybe the median than above. Well, I don't guess it was more, but it's just the way the chart is. It looks like it's a little bit fatter on the bottom side than it was on the top side. Let's see if there's anything else in here I need to talk to you about. I think that's probably about it. Yep. I think I touched on most of that. The last chart we're going to talk about, I think, one of the last charts is the sleep patterns of Duke University scholars. And it's talking about the number of hours of sleep and the standard deviation of the sleep. This chart was probably pretty cool to me once we finally got all the data entered. My son and I started playing with it, and it was neat that we could change the mean and the standard deviation and make the chart really peaky, or we could make it just nearly flat. It was kind of cool to do all that stuff, and my son really thought that was neat because he's never done one of these either. Doing one of the charts like these, he's never had to put that kind of stuff in. We both thought it was kind of cool. It does take a while to enter all the data, but once we get all that stuff in there, it's pretty sharp. My Z-score was within 34.1 to the left of the mean by just a little. I'm 60 years old, and Miss Benzie explained the mean to the Z-score a little bit more. You can see where I placed it in here in my black line. That's where I am usually. I usually get about 6 hours a night. Sometimes not even, or 6 hours a day, really, because I work nights. But today I slept 2 hours before this class. I came to the class, and then I'll sleep from whenever I get through here until about 3 this afternoon to get ready, and I got to be on my way to work by 5. So I probably won't get 4 hours of sleep today, 4.5 maybe. But when I'm not working, in the average time, I'll usually get about 6 hours. Is all that I've gotten for years. And this chart, we put all these things here, trying to get everything as square as we could, get all the data information in there. It was interesting putting all this in, and it was the formulas on this were probably really, really tough for me trying to get all the stuff because I'm real slow with all this, but it's kind of cool. It was kind of interesting doing it. This next chart is about the household income, and it too is a skewed chart. The data on it is all pushed one way, to where a person can not really see the way that the things are. Skewed right just by looking at it. So the chart we came up has a mean in the middle, and it's more like it should be, starting more like at 0. The chart to the left here shows the median is $49,454. It was already off to the right, and then if you look all the way over here, the top 5% are anywhere from 180,000 on up to over 200,000. So the income is probably, really a lot less than 49,000. I would think it's probably more if you took everyone. So there's a whole lot more poor folks than there is rich folks. So probably it's going to be somewhere in the $20,000-$30,000 range is what I would say, looking at this, the way the chart really is, if that was done correctly. We're going to get down here to Elon Musk. Had a flamethrower business. We all know him as Mr. Tesla. He got the electric cars and all this other kind of things, but he went into a flamethrower business for just a little while, and he said he was going to do, according to them videos that I watched, he said he was only going to do 20,000 flamethrowers. And the initial startup of his business, I think, was $12,000. You can see that right here as the graph goes, that he started up. I put it in green because that was kind of the start, take off. All right. He takes off, he's starting to make flamethrowers and everything else, and he finally starts selling some of them. And when he gets to about, was it about 100 of them? When he gets to about 100 of them, he's sold $500,000 worth of flamethrowers. But it shows that he's in a hole, what did I say on here? About 120,000 of them. He's in a hole about 70,000. Okay, he had spent about $120,000 making the flamethrowers, when he had 100. That was his lowest point down here at 100. And he had spent $120,000, and all he had taken in was $50,000. So he had to do something. So that was the bottom of it. So he keeps on selling them, keeps on selling them. From what he said in the video, they were sold even though he was telling people not to buy them. You know, he said, don't even buy that flamethrower. He said, you know, because they're not a good investment or anything else. But don't even buy one. But heck, they were buying them faster than he could build them. So by the time he had about 200 flamethrowers, 203, I think they were broke even at about 203 flamethrowers. And he went on to make over $5 million just out of selling 20,000 doggone flamethrowers with this thing. By the time they had made the 258th flamethrower, they had made over $90,000. They started making money when they had about 203, and from there on, you know, just the sky was the limit. I wrote in this little paragraph that I was in my business for myself for almost 30 years in Hot Springs. I used to tell people all the time, you know, sometimes of the year you get to eat chicken, other times of the year you get to eat the feathers, because it's just the way business was. You know, sometimes it was, sometimes we were rocking and rolling, making money, and everything was fine. Other times, man, you just had to really, really watch your P's and Q's. It's tough being in business. It seems like everything in the world is against you. There's a tax bill, there's payroll taxes, income taxes, sales taxes, permits. You got to pay insurance. You have to make payroll, inventory and supplies, and it just goes on and on and on. Where there's, I mean, I always would say try to stop the bleeding, because you're spending so much money doing different things just to try to keep things going, trying to keep your employees with a job. You know, there was the best thing that I had about being in business, what I enjoyed the most was my customers. I still work on some of my customers' cars now. You know, then it's been, I think I closed my last store, and I think it was like 07, something like that. And here it is, 2019, and I still have people call me up. I had a guy bring a generator over to the house yesterday that I'll repair for him, and I'll get it going for him. So I'm always doing different things for folks. What he said about having a product or service that is a lot better than the other guys is spot on. You don't need to have something that's just a little better, because they're not going to. You got to have something people to turn them to you. I would love to be in the restaurant business, but the hardest thing about being in the restaurant business is your quality control and keeping that level of, man, this is the best food I've ever ate, or this is the most unusual food I've ever ate, or anything else. I'm a heck of a cook. I do a lot of smoking and everything else, and people love my food. They all tell me I should be in business. Me and my wife, we've won contests with it. We've done all kinds of things like that. But it's such a drain to get in the business and have employees that don't have the same vision as you, that don't have the same want to as you. And so that's why I'm not in the food service business nowadays, is because it's just, you know, it's just too tough to do to keep it rolling. These are some more of the rest of the charts that I made up to show where the median was, where they broke even. And then this is where they started making money. From the 258 on, they started making big money. You know, it just was, I mean, the profit was going crazy. They got on past everything, and, you know, Mr. Musk just went on, and he done well. He's done well, and seemed like just about everything he touched. He maybe sometimes gets a little too big for his britches, but the electric cars, I think that's the thing of the future. My son and I were talking about it just the other day. I wouldn't be opposed to drive one, and I've always loved the sound of a V8 motor and it, you know, making some racket and all other kind of stuff. But it'd be kind of cool to see an electric car and see how it does. And because just like when you turn a fan on, it's instant. That fan goes up to the RPM or the power that it's supposed to be. And I think electric cars are a whole lot like that. So anyway, this is the end of my video. These are all my little graphs and things I did, and hope you enjoy.